We're going to do something a little bit different today. We finished Titus last week, so we kind of actually have a freedom to do this. You're all going to sit over there. I kind of feel like I need to. This weekend is also the weekend for Purim. So the kids have been learning about Queen Esther in the class for the last couple of weeks. So I thought we would do one of the things that they do during the Feast of Purim, and that is go through the whole book of Esther. We'll just read through it, but it's kind of cool. You guys remember what you have to do or what you're supposed to do? So when I say Mordecai's name, what do you do? Oh, come on. Like when you're in the rooms and we can hear you out here. And then when I say Haman's name, what are you going to do? Boo. Yeah, right. That's what they do during the Purim thing, is when they read the book of Esther, and it's, you feel free to join the kids because I think it's everybody. It's not just the kids that do that. But that's one of the things they do. They cheer for their hero and they boo for the villain. So I found out it's a much bigger thing than I thought it was, than I realized that it was. The Jews believe that after Messiah comes, which, you know, they're obviously are a little late to that, but after he comes and establishes his kingdom, all the feast days are going to go away and be done because they will have all been fulfilled except for Hanukkah and Purim, because they're not biblical feasts. And they believe they're going to be able to keep those two feasts even in the new kingdom. So I'm not sure why they believe all that, but other than the rabbis have told them. They also dress up on Hanukkah, or on Hanukkah. I never should have mentioned the other one. They also dress up on Purim, and they wear masks and the whole thing, partly because Esther's name, the name Esther, means something hidden. And so we'll see as we go through the story, she hid her identity as a Jew until it was needful to come against Haman. And then she reveals her identity as being Jewish. So obviously her name means something hidden, and so they, at one point in the feast, they come in all dressed up in costume and everything, and then they'll take off their mask. I think it's while they're reading the book of Esther, but I'm not sure. But they take it off to reveal their identities, just to kind of go through her thing. There's you should look it up. It's really kind of strange to me that they would think they're going to keep this holiday in the kingdom with the Messiah, because they freak out on this holiday, man. It's a party. When I first watched a couple videos, I just thought they got really excited. They're really celebrating the deliverance of Israel from Haman, an Amalekite, Agagite to begin with, but specifically Agag, but he was an Amalekite, somebody that they were supposed to wipe out. Saul was supposed to have killed Agag and all the Amalekites that he came into war there with, and he didn't kill all of them. Remember, he kept Agag alive, and he evidently kept some more alive, and David would have to fight the Amalekites after that, and whatnot. But this Agagite, this man who comes from the same family as Saul, in the same, or not as Saul, same family as Agag, and then you have Mordecai, who comes from the same tribe as King Saul. So that family is going to finish the job through Mordecai in the proclamation of the king here, and finish the job that Saul was ordered to do to begin with. So anyhow, just wanted to give you a little bit of background on all that, so you can kind of see some of the things that are going on. All right, so you guys ready? Yeah? All right, we're going to start right now. It says, "Now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus," this was the Ahasuerus who reigned over 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia. "In those days, when King Ahasuerus sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was in Shushan the citadel, that in the third year of his reign, he made a feast for all his officials and servants, the powers of Persia and Media, the nobles and the princes of the provinces being before him. When he showed the riches of his glorious kingdom and the splendor of his excellent majesty for many days, 180 days in all. And when these days were completed, the king made a feast lasting 7 days for all the people who were present in Shushan the citadel, from great to small, in the court of the garden of the king's palace. There were white and blue linen curtains fastened with cords of fine linen and purple, on silver rods and marble pillars, and the churches. And the couches were of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement of alabaster, turquoise, and white and black marble. And they served drinks in golden vessels, each vessel being different from the other, with royal wine in abundance, according to the generosity of the king. In accordance with the law, the drinking was not compulsory, for so the king had ordered all the officers of his household that they should do according to each man's pleasure. Queen Vashti also made a feast for the women in the royal palace which belonged to King Ahasuerus. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, Abagatha, whatever, Zethar, Carcass, 7 eunuchs who served in the presence of King Ahasuerus, to bring Queen Vashti before the king, wearing her royal crown, in order to show her beauty to the people and the officials, for she was beautiful to behold. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command, brought by his eunuchs. Therefore the king was furious, and his anger burned within him. Then the king said to the wise men, who understood the times, for this was the king's manner toward all who knew law and justice, those closest to him being Karshina, Sethar, Admatha, Tarshish, Meres, Marcina, and Memucan, the 7 princes of Persia and Media, who had access to the king's presence, and who ranked highest in the kingdom. What shall we do to Queen Vashti according to the law, because she did not obey the command of King Ahasuerus, brought to her by the eunuchs? And Memucan answered before the king and the princes, Queen Vashti has not only wronged the king, but also all the princes and all the people who are in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. For the queen's behavior will become known to all women, so that they will despise their husbands in their eyes. When they report, King Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vashti to be brought in before him, but she did not come. This very day the noble ladies of Persia and Media will say to all the king's officials that they have heard of the behavior of the queen. Thus there will be excessive contempt and wrath. If it pleases the king, let a royal decree go out from him, and let it be recorded in the laws of the Persians and the Medes, so that it will not be altered, that Vashti shall come no more before King Ahasuerus. And let the king give her royal position to another who is better than she. When the king's decree, which he will make, is proclaimed throughout all the empire, for it is great, all wives will honor their husbands, both great and small. And the reply pleased the king and the princes, and the king did according to the word of Memucan. Then he sent letters to all the king's provinces, to each province in its own script, to every people in their own language, that each man should be master in his own house and speak in the language of his own people. All right, so you have some characters here that have been introduced. You got Queen Vashti and King Ahasuerus, and then some other guys that are hard to pronounce. and he has this big feast, and he's showing off all of his riches. He's showing off his power by showing off everything that he has. You imagine all these people come for a party, and they have their own gold cups, and each one is unique. Each one is different from the other. And that, again, just shows that he has this power and this wealth to be able to order all these things, to buy all these things, to pay for all this stuff, right? So he's just basically putting on a show of how great he is. And so when he has the order for Vashti to come in and kind of show her off, and she refuses to come, then that makes the king kind of mad, because she's showing that he doesn't have all the power. So the princes and the king, they're worried that everybody's going to see it that way, that you don't have to obey the king when he gives an order. You can do whatever you want to do. You can resist him all you want to. So they make this big decree, and when the king says something in Persia, it can't be changed, not even by the king. So he can't go back on his own word. Once he's passed a law, it stays that way. He has to make another law to actually change a direction, if that's what he's going to do. He can't just make a law and then say, oh, we'll just get rid of that one and ignore it. He's got to find a way to make another law to get around it. So his law has even bound himself in all of this. So now you have about 4 years between chapter 1 and chapter 2. In that time, Ahasuerus has gone to try to invade Greece, and a man with a much bigger army is turned away from by a country that has a much smaller army, and he's embarrassed, basically. But he's sitting at home now. He's back home, and he's just trying to kind of lick his wounds there. He's trying to get over what happened. So chapter 2 says, after these things, when the wrath of King Ahasuerus subsided, he remembered Vashti, what she had done, and what had been decreed against her. Then the king's servants who attended him said, let beautiful young virgins be brought before the king, or brought for the king, and let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom, that they may gather all the beautiful young virgins in Shushan the citadel into the women's quarters, under the custody of Haggai, the king's eunuch, custodian of the women. Let beauty preparations be given them. Then let the young women who please the king, or the young woman who pleases the king, be queen instead of Vashti. And this thing pleased the king, and he did so. In Shushan the citadel there was a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai. Hey! Whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite. Kish had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captives who had been captured with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, carried away. And Mordecai had brought up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother. The young woman was lovely and beautiful when her father and mother died. Mordecai took her as his own daughter. So it was when the king's command and decree were heard, and when many young women were gathered at Shushan the citadel under the custody of Haggai, that Esther also was taken to the king's palace into the care of Haggai, whatever his name is, the eunuch, right? The custodian of the women. That's what we'll call him. Now the young woman pleased him, and she obtained his favor. So he readily gave beauty preparations to her, besides her allowance. Then 7 choice maidservants were provided for her from the king's palace, and he moved her and her maidservants to the best place in the house of the women. Esther had not revealed her people or family, for Mordecai had charged her not to reveal it. And every day Mordecai placed in front of the court of women. Mordecai paced in front of the court of women's quarters, to learn of Esther's welfare and what was happening to her. And each young woman's turn came to go into King Ahasuerus after she had completed 12 months preparation according to the regulations for the women. For thus were the days of their preparation appointed 6 6 months with oil and myrrh, and 6 months with perfumes and preparations for beautifying women. Thus prepared, each young woman went in to the king, and she was given whatever she desired to take with her from the women's quarters to the king's palace. In the evening she went, and in the morning she returned to the second house of the women, to the custody of Shahasagags, sure, the king's eunuch, who kept the concubines. She would not go in to the king again unless the king delighted in her and called her by name. Now when the turn came for Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her as his daughter to go into the king, she requested nothing but what Haggai, the king's eunuch, the custodian of the women, advised, and Esther obtained favor in the sight of all who saw her. So Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus into his royal palace in the 10th month, in which is the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. The king loved Esther more than all the other women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins. So he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Then the king made a great feast, the feast of Esther, for all his officials and servants, and he proclaimed a holiday in the provinces and gave gifts according to the generosity of the king. And when the virgins were gathered together a second time, Mordecai sat within the king's gate. Now Esther had not revealed her family and her people, just as Mordecai had charged her. For Esther obeyed the command of Mordecai, as when she was brought up by him. In those days, while Mordecai sat within... Uh-oh. He thought we said Haven. What'd you do, Grandma? You scare him or what? In those days, while Mordecai sat within the king's gate, two of the king's eunuchs, Bigthan and Teresh, doorkeepers, became furious and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. So the matter became known to Mordecai, who told Queen Esther, and Esther informed the king in Mordecai's name. And when an inquiry was made into the matter, it was confirmed, and both were hanged on a gallows. And it was written in the book of the Chronicles in the presence of the king. And after these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him and set him above all the princes who were with him. And all the king's servants who were within the king's gate bowed and paid homage to Haman, for so the king had commanded concerning him. But Mordecai would not bow to or pay homage. Then the king's servants who were within the king's gate said to Mordecai, "Why do you transgress the king's command?" Now it happened when they spoke to him daily, and he would not listen to them, that they told it to Haman, to see whether Mordecai's words would stand. For Mordecai had told them that he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow or pay homage, Haman was filled with wrath. But he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone. For they had told him of the people of Mordecai. Instead, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews who were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, the people of Mordecai. In the first month, which is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast pur, that is the lot, for Haman to determine the day and the month until it fell on the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. Then Haman said to said to King Ahasuerus, "There is a certain people scattered and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from all other peoples, and they do not keep the king's laws. Therefore, it is not fitting for the king to let them remain. If it pleases the king, let a decree be written that they will be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who do the work, to bring it into the king's treasuries." So the king took his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. And the king said to Haman, "The money and the people are given to you to do with them as seems good to you." Then the king's scribes were called on the 13th day of the first month, and a decree was written according to all that Haman commanded. To the king's satraps, to the governors who were over each province, to the officials of all people, to every province according to its scripture or its script, and to every people according to their language, in the name of King Ahasuerus, it was written and sealed with the king's signet ring. And the letters were sent by couriers into all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all the Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to plunder their possessions. A copy of the document was to be issued as law in every province, being published for all people, that they should be ready for that day. The couriers went out, hastened by the king's command, and the decree which was proclaimed in Shushan the citadel, so that the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Shushan was perplexed. So when Mordecai learned all that had happened, he tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes and went out into the midst of the city. He cried out with a loud and bitter cry. He went as far as the front of the king's gate, for no one might enter the king's gate clothed in sackcloth. And in every province where the king's command and decree arrived, there was a great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. So Esther's maids and eunuchs came and told her, and the queen was deeply distressed. Then she sent garments to clothe Mordecai, and to take his sackcloth away from him, but he would not accept them. Then Esther called Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs, whom he had appointed to attend her, and she gave him a command concerning Mordecai, to learn what and why this was. So Hathach went out to Mordecai in the city square that was in front of the king's gate, and Mordecai told him all that had happened to him and the sum of money that Haman had promised to pay into the king's treasuries to destroy the Jews. He also gave him a copy of the written decree for their destruction, which was given at Shushan, that he might show it to Esther and explain it to her, and that he might command her to go into the king and make supplication to him and plead before him for her people. So Hathach returned and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Then Esther spoke to Hathach and gave him a command for Mordecai. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that any man or woman who goes into the inner court of the king who has not been called, he has but one law: put all to death, except the one to whom the king holds out the golden scepter, that he may live. Yet I myself have not been called to go in to the king these 30 days. So they told Mordecai Esther's words, and Mordecai told them to answer Esther, "Do not think in your heart that you will escape in the king's palace any more than all the other Jews. For if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. Yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, "Go, gather all the Jews who are present in Shushan, and fast for me. Neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will fast likewise, and so I will go to the king, which is against the law, and if I perish, I perish." So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther had commanded him. Now it happened on the 3rd day that Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace, across from the king's house, while the king sat on his royal throne in the royal house, facing the entrance of the house. So it was when the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court that she found favor in his sight, and the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. Then Esther went near and touched the top of the scepter, and the king said to her, "What do you wish, Queen Esther? What is your request?" "It shall be given to you up to half the kingdom." So Esther answered, "If it pleases the king, let the king and Haman come today to a banquet that I have prepared for him." Then the king said, "Bring Haman quickly, that he may do as Esther has said." So the king and Haman went to the banquet that Esther had prepared. At the banquet of wine, the king said to Esther, "What is your petition?" "It shall be granted to you. What is your request? Up to half the kingdom it shall be done." Then Esther answered and said, "My petition and request is this: if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, then let the king and Haman come to the banquet which I will prepare for them, and tomorrow I will do as the king has said." So Haman went out that day joyful and with a glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, and that he did not stand or tremble before him, he was filled with indignation against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home, and he sent and called for his friends and his wife Zeresh. Then Haman told them of his great riches, the multitude of his children, everything in which the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced him above the officials and servants of the king. Moreover, Haman said, besides Queen Esther invited no one but me to come with the king to the banquet that she prepared, and tomorrow I am again invited by her along with the king. Yet all this avails me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai, the Jew, sitting in the king's gate. Then his wife Zeresh and all of his friends said to him, Let a gallows be made 50 cubits high, and in the morning suggest to the king that Mordecai be hanged on it. Then go merrily with the king to the banquet. And the thing pleased Haman, so he had the gallows made. That night the king could not sleep. So one was commanded to bring the book of the records of the Chronicles, and they were read before the king. And it was found written in that Mordecai had told of Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs, the doorkeepers who had sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. Then the king said, What honor or dignity has been bestowed on Mordecai for this? And the king's servants who attended him said, Nothing has been done for him. So the king said, Who is in the court? Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the king's palace to suggest that the king hang Mordecai on the gallows that had been prepared for him. The king's servant said to him, Haman is there, standing in the court. And the king said, Let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king asked him, What shall be done for the man whom the king delights to honor. Now Haman thought in his heart, whom would the king delight to honor more than me? And Haman answered the king, for the man whom the king delights to honor, let a royal robe be brought, which the king has worn, and a horse on which the king has ridden, which has a royal crest placed on its head. Then let this robe and the horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that he may array the man whom the king delights to honor. Then parade him on horseback through the city square, and proclaim before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. Then the king said to Haman, hurry, take the robe and the horse as you have suggested, and do so for Mordecai, the Jew, and who sits within the king's gate. Leave nothing undone of all that you have spoken. So Haman took the robe and the horse and arrayed Mordecai and led him on horseback through the city square and proclaimed before him, thus it shall be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. That's my favorite part of the story, just about. Afterward, Mordecai went back to the king's gate, but Haman hurried to his house mourning and with his head covered. When Haman told his wife Zeresh and all his friends everything that had happened to him, his wise men and his wife Zeresh said to him, if Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of Jewish descent, you will not prevail against him, but will surely fall before him. While they were still talking with him, the king's eunuch came and hastened to bring Haman to the banquet which Esther had prepared. So the king and Haman went to dine with Queen Esther. And on the second day at the banquet of wine, the king again said to Esther, what is your petition, Queen Esther? It shall be granted you. And what is your request? Up to half the kingdom it shall be done. Then Queen Esther answered and said, if I have found favor in your sight, O king, and if it pleases the king, let my life be given to me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we have been sold, my people and I, to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated. Had we been sold as male and female slaves, I would have held my tongue, although the enemy could never compensate for the king's loss. So King Ahasuerus answered and said to Queen Esther, who is he and where is he who would dare presume in his heart to do such a thing? And Esther said, the adversary and the enemy is this wicked Haman. So Haman was terrified before the king or queen. Then the king arose in his wrath from the banquet of wine and went into the palace garden. But Haman stood before Queen Esther, pleading for his life, for he saw that evil was determined against him by the king. When the king returned from the palace garden to the place of the banquet of wine, Haman had fallen across the couch of Esther, or the couch where Esther was. Then the king said, will he also assault the queen while I am in the house? As the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Now Harbona, one of the eunuchs, said to the king, look, the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman made for Mordecai, who spoke good on the king's behalf, is standing at the house of Haman. When the king said, hang him on it. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's wrath subsided. On that day, King Ahasuerus gave Queen Esther the house of Haman, the enemy of the Jews, and Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told how he was related to her. Now the king took off his signet ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai. And Esther appointed Mordecai over the house of Haman. Now Esther spoke again to the king, fell down at his feet, and implored him with tears to counteract the evil of Haman the Agagite and the scheme which he had devised against the Jews. And the king held out his golden scepter toward Esther. So Esther arose and stood before the king and said, If it pleases the king, and if I have found favor in his sight, and the thing seems right to the king, and I am pleasing in his eyes, let it be written to revoke the letters devised by Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, which he wrote to annihilate the Jews who are in all the king's provinces. For how can I endure to see the evil that will come to my people, or how can I endure to see the destruction of my countrymen? Then King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther and to Mordecai the Jew, Indeed, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and they have hanged him on the gallows because he tried to lay his hand on the Jews. You yourselves write a decree concerning the Jews as you please in the king's name, and seal it with the king's signet ring. For whatever is written in the king's name and sealed with the king's signet ring, no one can revoke. So the king's scribes were called at that time in the 3rd month, which is the month of Sivan, on the 23rd day, and it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded, to the Jews, to the satraps, to the governors, to the princes of the provinces from India to Ethiopia, 127 provinces in all, to every province in its own script, to every people in their own language, and to the Jews in their own script and language. And he wrote in the name of King Ahasuerus, sealed it with the king's signet ring, and sent letters by couriers on horseback, riding on royal horses bred for swift steeds. By these letters the king permitted the Jews who were in every city to gather together to protect their lives, to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the forces of any people or province that would assault them, both little children and women, and to plunder their possessions. On one day in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, a copy of the document was to be issued as a decree in every province and published for all people, so that the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. The couriers who rode on royal horses went out and hastened and pressed on by the king's command, and the decree was issued in Shushan the citadel. So Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in a royal apparel of blue and white, with a great crown of gold and a garment of fine linen and purple. And the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad. The Jews had light and gladness and joy and honor. In every province in the city, wherever the king's command and decree came, the Jews had joy and gladness as a feast and a holiday. Then many of the people of the land became Jews because fear of the Jews fell upon them. Now in the 12th month, that is the month of Adar, on the 13th day, the time came for the king's command and his decree to be executed. On the day that the enemies of the Jews had hoped to overpower them, the opposite occurred, in that the Jews themselves overpowered those who hated them. The Jews gathered together in their cities throughout all the provinces of King Ahasuerus to lay hands on those who sought their harm. And no one could withstand them, because fear of them fell upon all people. And all the officials in the provinces, and the satraps, the governors, and all those doing the king's work helped the Jews, because the fear of Mordecai fell upon them. For Mordecai was great in the king's palace, and his fame spread throughout all the provinces. For this man Mordecai became increasingly prominent. Thus the Jews defeated all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, with slaughter and destruction, and did what they pleased with those who hated them. And in Shushan the citadel the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men. Also, Parsha, Parshandatha, Dalphon, Aspatha, uh, Poratha, Adaliah. Oh my goodness. Okay, the 10 sons of Haman, anyways. The son of Hamadatha, the enemy of the Jews. They killed, but they did not lay a hand on the plunder. On that day, the number of those who were killed in Shushan the citadel was brought to the king, and the king said to Queen Esther, "The Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men in Shushan the citadel, and the 10 sons of Haman. What have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now what is your petition? It shall be granted to you, or is your father's, or is your further request, or what is your further request? It shall be done." Then Esther said, "If it pleases the king, let it be granted to the Jews who are in Shushan to do again tomorrow according to today's decree, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged on the gallows." So the king commanded this to be done. The decree was issued in Shushan, and they hanged Haman's 10 sons. And the Jews who were in Shushan gathered together again on the 14th day of the month of Adar and killed 300 men at Shushan, but they did not lay a hand on the plunder. And the remainder of the Jews in the king's provinces gathered together and protected their lives had rest 75 and had rest from their enemies and killed 75,000 of their enemies, but they did not lay a hand on the plunder. This was on the 13th day of the month of Adar, and on the 14th of the month they rested and made it a day of feasting and gladness. But the Jews who were at Shushan assembled together on the 13th day as well as on the 14th day, and on the 15th day of the month they rested and made it a day of feasting and gladness. Therefore the Jews of the villages who dwelt in the unwalled towns celebrated the 14th day of the month of Adar with gladness and feasting and holiday, and for sending presents to one another. And Mordecai wrote these things and sent letters to all the Jews near and far who were in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, to establish among them that they should celebrate yearly the 14th and 15th days of the month of Adar, as the days on which the Jews had rest from their enemies, as the month which was turned from sorrow to joy for them, and from mourning to holiday, that they should make them days of feasting and joy, and sending presents to one another and gifts to the poor. So the Jews accepted the custom which they had begun, as Mordecai had written to them, because Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the enemy of all the Jews, had plotted against the Jews to annihilate them, and had cast Pur, that is the lot, to consume them and destroy them. But when Esther came before the king, he commanded by letter that this wicked plot which Haman had devised against the Jews should return to his own head, and that he and his sons should be hanged on the gallows. So they called these days Purim, after the name Pur. Therefore, because of all the words of this letter, what they had seen concerning this matter, and what had happened to them, the Jews established and imposed it upon themselves and their descendants and all who would join them, that without fail they should celebrate these 2 days every year according to the written instruction and according to the prescribed time, that these days should be remembered as kept throughout every generation, every family, every province, every city, that these days of Purim should not fail to be observed among the Jews, and that the memory of them should not perish among their descendants. Then Queen Esther and the daughter of Abihail, and with Mordecai, the Jew, wrote with full authority to confirm this second letter about Purim. And Mordecai sent letters to all the Jews to the 127 provinces in the kingdom of Ahasuerus with words of peace and truth to confirm these days of Purim at the appointed time, as Mordecai, the Jew, and Queen Esther had prescribed for them, and as they had decreed for themselves and their descendants concerning the matter of their fasting and lamenting. So the decree of Esther confirmed these matters of Purim, and it was written in the book. And King Ahasuerus imposed tribute on the land and on the islands of the sea. Now all the acts of his power and his might, and the account of the greatness of Mordecai, to which the king advanced him, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia? For Mordecai the Jew was second to King Ahasuerus, and was great among the Jews, and well received by the multitude of his brethren, seeking the good of his people and speaking peace to all his countrymen. Woo! There you go. It's quite a story, isn't it? There's a couple of things that I don't know if you guys have probably already been taught this, but do you know that God's name is not mentioned in this book? It's the only book in the Bible where his name is not mentioned in the whole thing. But you can see God's hand in all this. You can even hear it in Mordecai's words to Queen Esther that, if you don't do this, if you don't go into the king, that you're not going to escape this judgment. You're not going to escape this persecution, and that you and your father's house will still be destroyed. But who knows that you're not there for such a time as this. And we have the privilege of seeing the whole story. We can see that she was, in fact, put in this position for that time. That she was set where she was, even though it looked bad. And even though her life was in danger, not even just from the decree, but her life was in danger to go into the king without being called for. And yet she went ahead and she did what she needed to do. And even with the words, if I perish, I perish. If this cost me my life, it cost me my life. And so, you guys, that's what you're praying for, what you're asking for may not cost your life, or what God's directing you to do may not cost you your life in the sense that you will physically die because of it. But it might cost you your life in the sense of comfort, in the sense of being with family. God may move you. He may move you to another part of the world. Be willing to go. I've told you with this prayer challenge, I am putting everything out there. Everything is for him to bless or for him to take. And if it means this building, it means this building. My hope is that he'll bless us here and we'll continue to stay in this community, and this building will be full of people who need to know him. Not just people like we have now, because I'm looking now and I'm thinking everybody here I know fairly well to one degree or another. And I can pretty much say with assurance that I know everybody here is ready to go. But that means everybody here should be ready to serve until we go. And there's a whole boatload of people out there. Meyer parking lot's full, Menard's parking lot's full. Those are all people who don't belong to him. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And there's other churches in town that are full. We don't have to have people or coax people from another church to come here. There are many people out there who need to be saved, who need to know Jesus. People all over this world. Right? So my hope is we stay here, we affect this community in a great way. And we now have an outreach in Dowagiac, and now I am, at least not necessarily in the name of the church, but have an outreach, a youth outreach in Schoolcraft. So ask God what he wants you to do. And if you don't think that you have the time for it, make the time for it. Because if he answers you and he says, I want you to do this, I want you to be involved here, then you need to go and do it. You need to do it without fear. And that's a big mouth pastor saying that, to be honest with you, because usually when I'm pushed in a direction, I go shaking. But that's not bad either, right? To be have a fear of God, so that the fear of him overcomes the fear of this world. And everything that would tell me that I can't do it, I can't succeed in it, it's not going to work. All of this garbage that comes with that. The fear of God is the one that's the fear that should make me tremble. To not do what he's wanting me to do. You know, we can take words from Mordecai too. If you don't, God will raise up somebody else. But you're going to have to face him. You know? And there's probably already moments in most of us that are older, there's already moments in our life where we have had to go and ask for his forgiveness for not moving ahead when he wanted us to. I'll tell you guys, you gotta, this is what Pastor Chuck used to tell pastors all the time, or young men who thought they were going to be pastors or start some kind of ministry. If you think God's calling you to do it, go do it, because you'll be miserable if you don't. And if you step out in faith and you find out that it was only for a short time, or you find out that you were wrong and God's not in it, then come home. Come home until he tells you to go again. And I have been on the verge of going a couple of times, and sometimes I think it's just God wanting to show me that I can be obedient with what he wants me to do. And then he pulls me back. So it doesn't always work out. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I thought I would be starting a church in Battle Creek. Looking around for places, me and Pastor Roger were praying about it, and about a month into doing that, Pastor Rick came to us and said, hey, I believe God wants me to start a church in Battle Creek. And we're like, really? And I felt I was okay with it. I think Roger was more afraid of how I was going to feel about it, and maybe willing to be defensive on my behalf, but we pulled back. We let Rick go, and they're prospering there in Battle Creek, and in a couple years after that, here I was. So it was just wait a little longer. To be honest with you guys, I came back 15 years before that to start a church in Michigan anywhere. When we moved back in 95, we didn't come down here and start this until 09. And there were a couple moves along the way. But we've been put here, we've been placed here in this time for his purpose. And just like Esther had the honor of being there to defend her people, just like David was set there in the time that he was set for God's purpose, and Ezra and Nehemiah were there to bring the people back into the land, and Peter and James and John were born in the time that they were to be able to walk with the Lord. All these things that were set in order by God. Your life is just as purposeful for God as any of theirs. And whatever he calls you to do, it's not about great or small in our eyes. If we're obedient to him, no matter what it looks like to everybody else, if we're obedient to him, then it's great to him. It's for his purpose. And his purposes are not small. You know? If it's for one life, his purpose is not small. So that being said, and this was a good time, I guess, to read this book. We have a young couple who will be leaving us soon. We wanted to do this today, right? Still? Yep. Who will be leaving us soon. John and Abby feel like they've been being called back to Indianapolis to minister to their friends. And some of them are ones who were here that Sunday that they all came to their house and crashed out, and then they brought them here on Sunday morning. and kind of kind of just, what do you call that? You know, they shanghaied him. Yeah, it was get up, we're going to breakfast. Oh yeah, by the way, it's at the church. So kind of ambushed him a little bit, and they had some willing accomplices, so it was good. But they're going to go back and it's not going to be easy. But as they've been praying for this, John's got a job offer. God just, on the same day John got his job offer, Abby got permission from her company that she works for to work from home on the same day. Yeah, you usually have to be with this company 3 years, you said, before you can do something like that? And she's got permission. So God's moving. They've already got friends that are willing to go to church with them. The intent is to be able to do Bible studies with their friends. So got Bill Goodrich's church there in Indianapolis, Horizon, which is a big Calvary Chapel. And so we're going to try to get them hooked in there. And I'm actually going to be meeting with Bill in a couple of weeks. So I'll bring you guys up. I'll throw you in his face. So I'm sure he'll be excited and want to meet you guys and meet with you guys. So anyways, so let's do this to end. Have you guys come on? Do you guys got another song? All right, well, you guys, let's get everybody up here and then we'll do it after that. What is it? Perfect. You two come up here. Everybody get around them, and then we'll have the worship team do this. This is perfect. The song is perfect. The story's been perfect, and you guys being obedient. Sure. Just gather over here, Jack. Jack. Awesome. Too late, Nick. Yeah, we're just going to sing it down here, just with the guitar. Well, why don't we pray for these guys first? Come over here. All right. Well, Father, we just want to lift up John and Abby this morning. So thankful that they are willing to answer your call and to move forward, Lord, and that they are willing to put their life in front of you and let you do with it as you please. So Lord, we pray that as they go, their hearts will be prepared for this. Lord, that you give them understanding of your word like they've never had before, so that they can pour into their friends. Lord, we look forward to stories of people giving their lives to you because of their obedience, and Lord, people being healed and just changed lives. And Lord, pray that it continues on and grows out beyond their friends even that they know now, that they will be an influence for you wherever they go for the rest of their life. Lord, their hearts will always be to be obedient to you, that they will, without fear, go wherever you want them to go. And even more so, Lord, that without fear, they will speak your word and live it out in front of everybody. Lord, you have shown that you're making this way sure and possible for them, and that you're going before them and arranging everything. So I pray that they would just have faith in that. Lord, that you would pour out your Spirit on them and fill them with your Holy Spirit every day as they go, Lord. Let them know that you're there with them always. And may they always see you active in their life. In Jesus' name, amen.